My name is Victoria Sterling, I'm 34 years old, and on paper, I was just the quiet, soft-spoken wife who inherited a bit of family money. At least, that was the story my husband, Julian, preferred to tell everyone. Julian had a way of downplaying every single thing I accomplished. When we moved into our $4.5 million estate, he strutted through the marble halls like a conqueror, convincing himself that I was nothing more than a spoiled heiress who got lucky. He treated our home like his personal playground, hosting lavish weekend parties for his friends and leaving me to clean up the mess. What Julian never bothered to learn was that I didn't inherit a single dime. I built my wealth from the ground up as the founder and sole CEO of a private logistics conglomerate. The mansion wasn't purchased with personal savings. It was acquired through my corporate firm as an executive holding long before Julian and I ever crossed paths. I kept my business affairs private simply because I valued modesty, but Julian mistook my silence for weakness. The real trouble began 6 months ago when Julian's mother, Evelyn, moved into our guest wing temporarily. Within 48 hours, temporary turned into permanent. Evelyn strutted around the estate like she owned the title deed, constantly criticizing my taste, rearranging my furniture, and demanding costly renovations. She spoke to me as if I were an unwanted squatter in my own home, reminding me daily how lucky I was that her polished, ambitious son had chosen to marry me. Julian backed her up every step of the way, completely blind to the fact that his mother's toxic entitlement was systematically destroying our marriage. Every evening dinner turned into an interrogation about my finances, with Evelyn openly speculating on how much the property would sell for if Julian ever decided to liquidate his assets. Little did they know, their greedy assumptions were setting a legal trap that they would never be able to crawl out of. The trap was finally sprung on a rainy Tuesday morning. I walked down to the main dining room, expecting my usual quiet coffee, only to find Julian and Evelyn sitting at the head of the polished mahogany table. Beside them sat a sharp-featured man in a tailored charcoal suit, adjusting a stack of legal documents. There was no greeting, no warmth, and certainly no explanation. Evelyn leaned back in her chair with a triumphant smirk, while Julian refused to make direct eye contact, nervously drumming his fingers against his coffee cup. "Victoria," Julian said, his voice attempting a firmness he didn't actually possess. "We need to talk about the future. Things haven't been working between us, and frankly, I've outgrown this marriage." Before I could even process his sudden coldness, the lawyer slid a thick manila folder across the table toward me. Evelyn tapped her long, manicured nails against the wood, her eyes glinting with unrefined greed. "That is a formal marital dissolution petition," she announced, her tone dripping with condescension. "We've been very generous, Victoria. Under state law, marital assets are subject to an equal split. As Julian's mother, I'm making sure my son gets every single dollar he is legally owed." I opened the folder and flipped through the pages. The demands were staggering. Julian was demanding 50% of the estate's current market value, $25,000 a month in temporary spousal support, and immediate exclusive possession of the mansion while the divorce proceeded. They had even drafted a clause giving me 30 days to pack my personal belongings and vacate the premises. "You've had a good run living in luxury on your family's old name," Julian chimed in, his confidence returning as he hid behind his lawyer. "But it's time for a reality check. Half of this house is mine. Once we liquidate the estate, I'll finally have the capital I need to build the life I actually deserve, without you weighing me down." They sat there looking like predators who had backed their prey into a corner, completely convinced that a helpless, grieving wife was about to burst into tears and surrender. I looked down at the demanding settlement papers, then looked back up at Julian and his mother. Instead of breaking down into the hysterical tears they were so clearly anticipating, I closed the folder with a soft, deliberate snap and placed my hands neatly over the cover. The lawyer blinked, surprised by my total lack of panic, while Evelyn's smirk faltered just a fraction. "Is there something funny, Victoria?" Julian snapped, visibly unsettled by my silence. "You're reading your eviction notice, not a dinner menu." "What's funny, Julian, is your absolute confidence in things you know nothing about," I said, my voice smooth and utterly devoid of fear. I reached into my leather briefcase, pulled out a thick, leather-bound portfolio, and laid it directly beside their divorce petition. "You see, you and your mother built your entire strategy on a single, massive assumption, that this estate is my personal property." Their lawyer frowned, leaning forward to inspect the heavy seal on the cover of my documents. Mrs. Sterling, any real estate acquired prior to or during the marriage that serves as the primary marital residence is subject to division, I finished for him smoothly. Unless, of course, the property was never owned by either spouse in the first place. I opened the portfolio, revealing the official deed, corporate tax filings, and property registration records. This mansion was purchased 8 years ago by Sterling Global Enterprises LLC, a private holding corporation. It is registered strictly as an official corporate residence used for executive hosting and international client lodging. I do not own this house personally. My corporation owns it. Evelyn gasped, her face flushing a deep, angry crimson as she snatched the deed from the table. That's a technicality. You own the company, which means Julian owns half of everything the company owns. Check the prenuptial agreement Julian signed 4 years ago, I replied, looking directly at his pale, sweating face. Clause 14 clearly states that all corporate entities, commercial assets, and holding properties under Sterling Global Enterprises remain 100% separate property, untouched by marital claims. Julian didn't marry a trust fund heiress, Evelyn. He married a CEO, and he just tried to shake down the wrong company. The silence in the room was deafening. Julian's mouth hung open, his face completely drained of color, while his high-priced attorney rapidly flipped through the prenuptial agreement, his forehead suddenly beaded with sweat. Evelyn looked back and forth between her son and the legal documents, her hands trembling with rage. This is a scam. Evelyn shrieked, slamming her fist onto the mahogany table. You tricked him. Julian, tell her she can't do this. You work hard, you deserve half of this life. Speaking of work, Julian, I said, leaning back in my chair and crossing my ankles. Let's talk about your career. Julian flinched. What does my job have to do with any of this? You've spent the last 3 years boasting about your comfortable middle management position at Apex Logistics, I replied softly. You thought you landed that role on your own merit. But Apex Logistics is a wholly owned subsidiary of Sterling Global Enterprises. I am your ultimate employer, Julian. I pulled a second set of documents from my portfolio and slid them across the table, right on top of their worthless divorce petition. These are your official termination papers. Effective immediately, you are fired for a severe conflict of interest and attempt to misuse corporate assets. And since your corporate vehicle was leased through Apex, the keys need to be left on the counter before you exit. Julian gasped, clutching his chest as if he'd been physically struck. You fired me? Victoria, you can't be serious. How am I supposed to pay my legal fees? That is no longer my concern, I said coldly. I then pulled out a bright yellow document bearing an official notary stamp and handed it directly to Evelyn. And this is for you, Evelyn. An official corporate notice to quit. Since this property is owned by a private enterprise, your presence here without a residential lease constitutes unlawful trespassing. You have exactly 24 hours to pack your belongings and vacate the premises. Evelyn stood up so fast her chair fell backward onto the hardwood floor. You can't throw me out. I am Julian's mother. Right on cue, the heavy iron gates at the end of the driveway hummed as they opened. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, 2 black SUVs pulled up, accompanied by a marked local police cruiser. 4 uniformed private security guards stepped out, led by my head of corporate security. They aren't here to negotiate, I said, rising from my seat and standing tall over the 3 of them. They are here to ensure a smooth transition. Your 24 hours start right now. By the end of the week, the chaos that had threatened to invade my life had completely evaporated. Julian's high-priced attorney quickly realized they had zero legal leverage and quietly advised his client to drop all claims against the estate. With no corporate salary, no savings, and mounting legal bills, Julian was forced to sign a clean, uncontested divorce settlement, walking away with nothing more than his personal clothing and a deeply bruised ego. Evelyn's grand dreams of living in a $4.5 million mansion dissolved into a harsh reality. With no income of his own, Julian had to move into a tiny, 1-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city, and Evelyn was forced to move right in with him. The woman who had spent months demanding marble upgrades and luxury accommodations was now sharing a cramped kitchen with the son she had encouraged to be so ruthlessly greedy. As for me, life at the estate returned to a deep, restorative peace. Without the constant weight of Julian's condescension and his mother's toxic presence, the mansion finally felt like a sanctuary rather than a battlefield. I promoted a deserving internal candidate to fill Julian's vacant manager position at Apex Logistics, ensuring the company continued to thrive without missing a single beat. I also established a mentorship program through my corporate firm, dedicated to helping young female entrepreneurs protect their intellectual property and business assets from predatory relationships. Looking back, keeping my corporate achievements private wasn't just a personal preference, it was the ultimate shield. It revealed the true character of the people I had allowed into my inner circle before they could do any real damage. I reclaimed my peace, my home, and my future, proving that true power doesn't need to shout, it simply needs to be protected. Thank you so much for following my story to the very end. What would you have done if you found yourself in my position? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. See you in the next story.